Now, the presence, Emma, of the Chinese warships off Australia's eastern and southern coastlines has triggered a lot of media and political reaction over the past week. But how unusual are these sorts of exercises, and should we be concerned? Joining us now from Canberra is Jennifer Parker, who is from the ANU's National Security College. Jennifer, good morning.
Hi James, thanks for having me on.
Oh, lovely to have you back. Now, a lot of different opinions have been published and broadcast over the past week or so about this. What's yours? Has there been a bit of an overreaction in Australia?
Look, I certainly think in some pockets there has been an overreaction to the threat posed by these warships. It is normal for warships to operate in international waters, in exclusive economic zones, and it's normal for warships to conduct gunnery firings. Now, of course, there are some challenges, and it's been talked about all week in terms of the way the Chinese warships went about those gunnery firings, and the Australian government was right to raise that diplomatically. But in terms of the idea that they somehow pose a threat to Australia or it's provocative, look, I think that's wrong. But I do think it does make us need to think about what our capabilities are and how the region is changing. It is uncommon to see Chinese warships down here. I certainly think it's the first time we've ever seen Chinese warships circumnavigate Australia, and that is a message about the changing region and the changing nature of China's capability.
Yes, the one advantage that Australia has in terms of strategic policy is that we are a very, very long way from anywhere, and those ships are a long way from home. The timing is quite curious though, isn't it? Coming so soon after Donald Trump takes over in the White House and as we are on the cusp of an election. Do you think it might have been timed to try to create some of these headlines?
Look, the timing is very convenient, and I suspect it was. I mean, these kind of deployments for most navies are planned at least a couple of months in advance, so I suspect it was picked to find that sweet spot. You mentioned about the fact that we've often been protected by our geography, but the problem with our geography is we're also vulnerable because of it. Because of our lengthy sea lines of communication, that maritime trade that needs to go a long way through the maritime domain, it is also vulnerable to things like interdiction. So it's a blessing, but it's also a curse.
And of course we import a lot of our fuel and other things like that, which is all part of the debate about what sort of submarines we need, which I don't want to get into this morning. I do want to ask you though, is this a sign we need to spend more on defence so at a minimum we can monitor these sorts of deployments a bit more easily and be more reassured that Australia is very safe and secure?
Look, I think the Department of Defence has done a good job in terms of monitoring this deployment. But in terms of the question of spending more on defence, the answer to that is absolutely yes. I know it's difficult for a country that is in a cost of living crisis to really have that long-term thinking, but we've got to ask ourselves the question, do we actually think we have the correct capabilities in the right numbers and the correct structures for that matter to deal with the changing threats in the region and the potential for a conflict in the region? And the answer to that question is no, and I honestly don't know many defence professionals or strategists who think the answer to that question is yes. And so therefore we really do need to think about defence spending. I know there's a view that we're at historical levels, but it's just not true. So we're at about 2% of GDP. The government has committed to 2.3% of GDP, which is a significant lift and the greatest lift in defence spending in the last 20 years. But we also talk about the fact that we are in the most significant strategic circumstances since World War II. During the Cold War, we averaged about 2.7% of GDP spending on defence, and when we needed to recapitalise or rebuild key elements of the defence forces, so buy new ships or submarines or aircraft, we went well above that, well above 3% at times. So the answer is yes, we don't have the capabilities that we need, and we are fast running out of time to be able to adjust that posture.
While we've got you, I wanted to ask you about another issue. There's been a huge amount of discussion about the future of Ukraine ever since those extraordinary scenes of the Trump-Vance-Zelensky meeting at the White House. Can the Europeans fix this situation, do you think, and prevent a workable ceasefire plan? And should Australia be involved in that in any way?
Look, certainly Australia has provided great support for Ukraine, as we should. You know, Ukraine is a vibrant democracy that has been illegally invaded by Russia, with hundreds of thousands of their civilians and military personnel killed. I don't think we have a role in the ceasefire negotiations. You can have too many fingers in that pie. Look, it is. I am hopeful, given the news overnight from Europe, that the European nations will be able to work together on a ceasefire deal that is amenable to Ukraine, to the US, and also to Russia. So I'm hopeful, but I don't hold my breath. They were significant scenes that we saw in the Oval Office over the weekend between the US President and the President of Ukraine. And I think we often use this term unprecedented. We've used it a lot about Chinese warships, but these significant unprecedented times in Europe, and we need to have great concern about it.